name is Tasia Griffin. I'm joined by my colleagues James Adams, Nicholas Planey, and Jared Reed-Dixon. Today we're going to be presenting our research that we conducted over the academic year, which explores diversity communication through the lens of the employee-organization relationship theory. Before we begin this presentation, I will put out a quick disclaimer because I know we've got some of our civilian colleagues here and this is your first time attending. Because we took our uniforms off and we did this research in a non-military capacity, that means that our findings, our proposals, everything that we're going to discuss today may not result in tangible action within the Navy. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go throughout this presentation. Show of hands, who here has heard of the phenomenon quiet quitting? Anyone, feel free to just call out what you think that means.
Resign before you actually say you're going to resign.
Okay, anyone else?
Doing the bare minimum.
Bare minimum.
You're doing only what you're paid to do.
Okay, yep, thank you, everyone. Did you know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that 47 million employees quit their jobs in 2021? That was the highest quit rate ever recorded. This mass exodus of employees was dubbed the Great Resignation. More recent research conducted by Gallup in 2023 found that nearly half of those surveyed admitted that they were actively looking for new jobs. Even more staggering, nearly 70% of employees said that they were currently engaging in quiet quitting or loud quitting, which, as we just discussed, quiet quitting means that you're intentionally reducing your productivity while on the clock, and loud quitting means you're actually engaging in disruptive behaviors because you're so dissatisfied. So, why is everyone so unhappy? What do you guys think?
Underpaid.
How do you like? Lack of purpose.
Redefining work-life balance.
Research shows organizational climate. That refers to work-life balance and whether you feel like you belong. Are you a member of a team? Do you feel like your voice matters? The data says that employees are 3 times more likely to quit for those reasons than for pay or benefits. So when we saw those figures, we were like, wow, okay. It caught our attention. We said, what's PA's role in this, and what can we do within our own organization to affect some positive change? We took a look at the Navy. Some clear trends, history of retention issues, struggling to meet recruiting goals, and among the most concerning, folks don't feel like they belong, particularly those with marginalized backgrounds. And that means women and racial or ethnic minorities.
We then compared Navy demographic rates with U.S. Census data. And we found that white and Asian officers largely match the U.S. population at large. However, there's room for improvement with our Black and Hispanic officers. But the biggest, starkest difference is when you look at gender. Women make up 51% of the population, but only 20% of our U.S. Navy officer ranks. And we specifically looked at Navy officers because they're leaders in our organization. They can affect change. And also, when you look at enlisted demographic diversity rates, they are the highest amongst all enlisted branches in the Department of Defense. We used a mixed method approach to our research. One method was a content analysis. So over a year period, we looked at Instagram still images and graphics, and looked specifically at the demographics of those depicted in those images. And we looked at 2 accounts specifically. We looked at U.S. Fleet Forces representing the East region of the United States. And then we looked at U.S. Pacific Fleet encompassing the West. So similar to Mark for actual areas that we're in.
Our second method was the online anonymous survey. We did not have approval to go through official Navy channels to give responses, so we had to go through affinity groups as well. For example, who's heard of NNOA, the National Naval Officers Association? Okay, good portion of the room. It's a large organization, a lot of naval officers. Who's in the female officers group? Okay, a good handful as well. I'm not in it, no. But a lot of you are. We knew a lot of people were in that group. So that's an example of just 2 of the many affinity groups that we try to get a diverse range of survey respondents from. And we ended up with 186 respondents total. Our survey asked questions about demographics, about their interactions or perceptions of their command social media pages, and also some questions adapted from these 4 research scales, which are employee-organization relationship, diversity climate, military organization commitment, and organizational belonging. From our survey respondents, we divided them into two groups, marginalized and non-marginalized. The non-marginalized groups are respondents who identified as white and male, and the non-marginalized group identified as, well, any race other than white, any gender other than male, and either Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. And the reason why we did this is because we wanted to compare the index mean scores from these scales between these two groups based on whether or not they saw marginalized individuals included in their command's social media posts.
So before we get into results, I just want to know, regardless of Marine Corps or Navy or practitioner, who in here reviews and approves imagery weekly? Love it. So for a Navy in the room, Chloe, what do you look for when you are looking at imagery?
OPSEC, safety, rust, maybe making sure that the site's on correctly.
Love it. Do we have a Marine that can speak up? Do we have a Marine in the room that can speak to it? Sir?
Specifically, I'm a Marine Corps PDO San Diego, so I'm looking at things that could spark or draw negative media attention. I'm looking at things that I should say, kind of violating, SAT or safety or things that could go against workflow order standards, things that could get my boss in trouble, fire, whatever. So.
As someone who recently left the Marine Corps Manpower Department, who owns diversity, equity, inclusion, the chief diversity officer, this created thing in my portfolio. We just some additional thing looked at in all photos. Are we being equitable to the force we have throughout all images?
No, that's right. So that's good. That's a perfect way to segue right into. What if I told you that in the seats that we are in as public relations practitioners, that we directly impact the attitudes and the belongings of our organizations? Based off our research, one of the first points that we found was that inclusive PA actions actually increase the attitudes and belongings of the organization. We found this via the scales that Nick talked about earlier. Our second point is that inclusive PA actions actually increase the employee retention likelihood throughout the Navy. And we found that through our survey results that we had. Now, our last point, which contrary to what we might think, whatever the headlines might say, or whatever we might just kind of, infer, we lose nothing as an organization with non-marginalized employees categorized as white males, and gain everything with marginalized employees by having just a simple, inclusive PA actions. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy to think about, right? Because even when we were going through those content analyses, I can look around the room and I know people that are approving and disapproving, let's just say a return to home port, right? Well, what photo are we putting on the cover photo of the carousel? Which one are we linking to the USMC.mil, press release? What are we doing to ensure that we are all the way including all of us and everybody representing everybody in the organization?
So as we look ahead about how can we continue to build upon this understanding, we really think the next step in our research is content specificity. So as Jared just said, we now know from our research, from our data, that inclusive PA actions directly impacts attitudes, sense of belonging, and retention likelihood for our sailors, right? But now we need to know, okay, what type of content do we need to be pushing out? Is it motion or still? What exactly is going to resonate the most with them? Once we can get to that next step, I think you're going to really see some tangible action. You're going to really see that we're going to better inform our communication strategies. Okay? Some of you may know us, and some of you, this may be your first time seeing us. In any case, please scan the QR code so we can stay in touch. We love to continue this dialogue and connect. As you do so, I'll open up the floor for questions, if you have any.
As likely non-marginalized, what kind of, as you looked at the non-marginalized data set compared to the identified marginalized data set, what types of correlations did you see between those perceptions of the organization and maybe belong?
Yeah. We didn't test for correlations exactly, but we tested in the differences in the scores from those research scales between those two groups based on whether or not they saw or did not see marginalized individuals in their command social media posts. And what we found was with the marginalized group only, there were statistically significant differences in all of those scores between those who saw marginalized individuals in their command social media posts and those who did not.